All right. Greetings, all. My apologies for running into one workshop into the other, but it works out well, right? No complaints.
Nope.
Uh, Thank you all for joining with Katie. It was a great introduction to this, but also just a great introduction to this conference in general. Abolition being the theme and reproductive futurism being the theme of creating news. So today we have Carmen, Nicole, and Evelyn with the BX Rebirth Collective based out of the Bronx in New York City. They will be discussing today on organizing cultural and community responsiveness in birth work and organizing birth workers locally. You guys have the floor.
Good evening,
Thank you,
everybody.
FA.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
FA, for having us. Um, well, I will start. Thank you. My name is Carmen Mojica. I identify as a Black Dominican woman born and raised in the Bronx. And I won't get into all the bio stuff. But I have the special honors of kicking this off and telling the story of how we came together. So let's see. It was a dark and stormy night. No, that was yesterday. No, actually, as we all are aware, we went into lockdown last March, in 2020. And we were just kind of all just scrambling, trying to figure out what all of us was doing, just trying to like get used to the new reality that we have now been in for almost 2 years. And so at that point, myself and probably Evelyn and Nicole were thinking about how do we hold down our children? How do we adjust to being home? How do we pivot to being working at home? And it was a bit of a coalescing of things that brought us together. The first thing the things I remember happening is that, as many of you probably are aware, we're following the news in about April, end of March, but April it was. Amber Rose Isaac was murdered by the medical industrial complex here in the Bronx, and as Black birth workers, any maternal death that we hear hits hard because we see ourselves in those women. We are all mothers, so we feel it. But the fact that it was at Montefiore, which all of us are familiar with living in the Bronx, really, like, for me at least, and I know that like Evelyn and Nicole felt very much similar. It was like a double stab to the heart that was something that was walking distance from me that happened. As I saw her Twitter post before she was murdered and killed, um, and then just hearing how she was ignored and hearing the story of how she was ignored. So that activated a lot of grief and anger in us. And then the other piece is that during that time, I got a phone call from another fellow birth worker asking me to help someone who was undocumented in the Bronx who had a small infant with formula. And it wasn't a strange request, but for some reason for me, I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm home, I have my food, I'm safe, like I'm not worried about any of these things. But if this person is going without diapers, wipes, and formula, how many other people in the Bronx are going without diapers, wipes, and formula? And at that time, there was a hodgepodge like group of other folks, kind of like rounding up donations and food and delivering them. And so that's how I got in touch with them. And then I just started rounding up money because I was like, all right, so like let's do this. And then of course the two people that came to mind immediately were Evelyn and Nicole. Evelyn and Nicole, we have relationships that span over the last couple of years, being in different spaces together, organizing, doing doula work, and just building as Black women who have very similar stories living in the Bronx. So literally, like, I hit them up. I called Nicole. Called Evelyn. I was like, "Yo, what we doing?" I mean, it was a little more eloquent than that, but ultimately it was like, yo, this is what's going on. Like, people are going without food. babies are going without clean diapers and wipes. People are like, children are about to go hungry. What are we going to do? Um, I joke around sometimes, but I'm actually very serious. So I was like, I called Evelyn and Nicole because they understand the assignment straight up. Like, there was no explanations needed. There was no, like, we all have very similar political views around blackness, liberation, and what black families deserve. So there was not much explaining to be done. It was like, what needs to be done and how do we do this? And so this happened very organically. We made BX Rebirth making the road by walking. There was no like, let's have a strategic planning meeting, or like, no, no, no. It was like, let's open up a Google Doc. Let's write down what it is that we want to do. Yes, the donation piece was integral, and it is something that has been a driving force, and actually what many folks on social media know us for. But we recognize that that was just one part of, like, there is no grassroots maternal health organization in the Bronx that was led by Black women. We all know Chanel and we love Chanel. We see the work that Chanel has done in Brooklyn, and separately over the years we've always been like, yo, we need this in the Bronx. But it was actually seeing this great need, which is still a need, which we can get into later, that was like, you know what, this is the time to do this now. So BX Rebirth, after we brainstormed a bunch of different names, and have a million and one different inside jokes about, came out of this. So in addition to doing the donations, and we're gonna have one of my other fellow co-birthers, co-creators, speak about. We had different programs, but we have a list of what are the specific demands and specific things that the Bronx needs. And when I say Bronx families, like, we are very much aware of the maternal health crisis for Black women, but because we have worked in our communities in different capacities that weren't just birth, we were like, all right, well, birth is important, but what surrounds the birthing person? What are the other needs and necessities that make up the needs of the Bronx? So that's why we speak about families as opposed to just like, we're just focusing on this singular person, because we need to address all health. As Evelyn always says, like, all health is reproductive health, right? The health of our children, the health of our communities, the food that we eat, the environments that we live in. And so we're very much driven by the fact that we need to approach this from a holistic point of view. So to date, we're coming up on 2 years of existence. Like I said, we've made the road by walking. As we got further along in our path with the donations, we brought on 2 other Black women into our organization. One that was able to help us coordinate and execute beautifully the donation program, and the other programs that we'll go into in a little bit. And then we brought on someone that can help us coordinate day to day. Like, we didn't go right away into becoming a nonprofit organization or anything like that. We have, where you see us now was like a bunch of ad hoc meetings, phone calls, like, yo, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna fundraise this? Everything that we have done, I want to say 99% of all of the things that we have accomplished have been crowdsourced. Like, yeah, we've gotten like help here and there from different grants and like generous donors, but all of this has been community funded. And I think I've covered the story of how we came in, but literally, like, it wasn't super fancy. We hit each other up and was like, yo, what's up? What we gotta do and how we gonna do it.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. Thank you so much, Carmen. I am Nicole Jeanbaptiste. I'm 1/3 of the co-birthers or co-creators of BX Rebirth and Progress Collective. I have been a lifelong resident of the Bronx. I am a birth worker and have been now for, it's going on 8 years. Birth has always been a part of my life, and it's something that for, ever since I can remember. It's been what I have wanted to be a part of, right? So, just to add to Carmen's really very on point explanation of how we came together, a lot of that has to do with just our very connectedness around birth and understanding our communities. And I think that's really important to highlight, because we're talking about grassroots organizing. We're talking about what it means to very truly intentionally target an issue that we've been personally affected by and consistently reminded of in our work, right? Sometimes you just have to hit the ground running. To start is really, really important. One of the things that I think is centered in our work is that, and I'll say one of the things that we whether or not we speak on it very much, and is often subconsciously censored, is this this friction between wanting to do it really well and knowing that we just need to do it. So it's not always going to be that we're presenting to communities something that is super, super polished. No, and the reason for that is because there's an urgency, right? And so we've worked really hard to really respond to that urgency in a way that we've been, and I think a lot of people here today can attest to the disappointment in that, especially where what we've been speaking of as a Black maternal health crisis is concerned, right? And Carmen, as the, and FA also as the midwives here, and I don't know if there are any other midwives in the room right now, but why did it take the COVID-19 pandemic for CPMs to be very temporarily, legally able to practice here in New York State, right? So where was that sort of urgency and energy prior to that, when we've been knowing that there is a maternal health crisis that is disproportionately affecting Black and Brown families? So yes, urgency, resisting perfection, resisting white supremacy has really been the center of the way that has been at the center of how we move. And I think that's very important. And it's also super, in some ways, it's basic, and I think that we need to return to that. We don't have to have everything super, super polished, and that is in my view, and I think that Carmen and Evelyn can also agree with this. That's how you show up for community. What does Lauryn Hill say? She says, or is it Erykah Badu? She says, you're something to the effect of, you can't go speaking the master's language to your people. They're not going to understand you.
Erica.
So really and truly, showing up in the ways that we know is going to communicate to folks that we want to reach most immediately. So I have been tasked with speaking about our programs. We have, in addition to supplying community with diapers, wipes, and formula, we, several months after formally organizing, we started up our doula corps. And we really, this was born out of this idea that Carmen spoke of really wanting to have an ancient song Bronx, ancient song doula services, which I would, very confidently believe that everyone is familiar with, is and has always been very much centered in Brooklyn, and they've always done amazing work. I think Evelyn and I, we trained through Ancient Song. Carmen has worked with Chanel and Ancient Song for quite some time, and we've known that we need that here in the Bronx. And so our aim has very much been to, in some ways, replicate that here for the Bronx. And the ways that we do that is being very intentional about recruiting people who are familiar with Bronx hospitals, with our neighborhoods, with our communities, folks who are Black, folks who are, invested in addressing the pervasive anti-Blackness that is prevalent in birth work, and doing so without any sort of hesitation or shyness. That's really, really important to us. One of the ways that we seek to cultivate that culture is meeting with one another. A lot of times you have like the birth work where we see and experience as work that happens in silos, and for no good reason. One of the things Evelyn and I often talk about is, why are we doing this very, very just, it's heavy work a lot. Why are we doing it solo? This is not how it was done back in the day. We should be partnering with one another. And on a deeper level than having a backup doula. So that's one thing that we're working on. Since launching our doula core, we have expanded from, I think we started with 2 doulas, and now we are working with a total of 6 doulas outside of ourselves. We've also entered into a partnership with Lincoln Hospital, which is also based here in the Bronx. And they reached out to us, really Evelyn, and to be specific, reached out to Evelyn and shared with us that they had received modest grant funding to expand doula access and awareness amongst their client population, right? So what that looks like is we're offering weekly childbirth education classes in both English and Spanish, as well as a parenting and pregnancy support group in both English and Spanish. I lead the English ones, Evelyn leads the Spanish ones. We are still, again, making the road as we walk. We're working on improving attendance to these things because, again, we have to recognize that this is what we're trying to do here is a culture shift. Folks who are planning to birth at Lincoln, who live in the surrounding area, doula access, doula care, doula services is something that we're, in the ways that we are presenting it through these programs, is something that needs to be learned, right? And I also think that it's one of the things we're working through is talking through and processing with folks the worthiness that is existent in their own being of receiving this sort of care and added support, right? So I think that that's something that we're coming up against as well in terms of actual attendance to our classes. I am seeing very positive results in regards to the actual one-to-one doula services from our doulas and patients who are at Lincoln Hospital, which is really nice. And similarly, I think most doulas who work within the medical industrial complex, what you can attest to is that, again, culture shift, coming up against really, really harmful practices, and how do we undo those things, and being reminded that this is, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And how do we protect ourselves along the way? How do we care for ourselves? And all along that process, realizing that through every step of this, we're having to remain in community. As the person who coordinates these doula meetings where we are all present on a monthly basis, just being very mindful of the fact that, these people are investing their time and energy, and in many ways sacrificing parts of them that we don't know how will heal, right? And so we're trying to do our part to show up as members of their communities to facilitate that. So yeah, there's just so much there with birth work and culture shifting, and also being mindful of one's self-care and what the process of healing is going to look like presently and long-term, specifically in the Bronx as well, where a lot of this, as I said, is new. Let's see, what else do I have to say about programming? Those are our main areas where we are offering doula services, mutual aid work, which Evelyn will get more into to share what our impact has been. And also on the advocacy front, I think some of you may have come from Katie's workshop prior to this. One of the things that we are really, enthusiastic about and wanting to continue working on is Katie's movement to birth liberation, where beginning January of this year, we were attending and participating in the ways that we could in her monthly gatherings and advocating for the communities that we serve and just learning a lot. I am not, someone who is very well versed in policy reform, right? Or regularly communicating with my local elected officials, but that's something that we've had to learn. And, Carmen has really taken the lead on that. She can speak more to what that's looked like. At one point, there was an email to, I want to say 25 to 30 elected officials, like, yo, we're doing the work. How can you support? Because you should be supporting, right? Yeah. So I will stop there, and I'll take questions, and I'll also hand it over to Evelyn.
Thanks. Are there any questions? Let's take a kind of like a pulse check right now to see where we are, anything that's coming up for y'all. Let's see what's in the chat here. What future programs are we considering? Is a question from FA, and my desire is for us to open up a daycare center. Like Nicole and Carmen know that all health is maternal health, and strong education is also part of maternal health in the way that I see it. Like there's nothing to a parent like being able to have an opportunity to leave their children in a place that is safe, that is culturally aware and responsive, and that how much brain space that creates. So just being able to offer that as a, and also it's like one of the things that is really challenging, or that is really great at the same time, is the realization that the better you are at something, the more need arises. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do, which I'm really grateful for being part of this collective with Nicole and Carmen, is that we've been able to pivot as needs arise. And we've also been able to tap into like the credibility that we have, right, in our community, like with our colleagues. I think that part of the benefit is that we've been able to come across and be the real credible messengers that we are. Like we understand the way that our participants and our clients, like they move, and the needs that show up for them, which are sometimes beyond just the academic, but like life to life things that happen. So we have a question from Rachel in the chat, which is, what barriers did you run into initially, and how have you moved past those? Well, everything was a barrier. Like, quite frankly, like we ain't got no money. That's a barrier, right? We want to do good and we ain't had no money. So that was a barrier. We also didn't know what the process was around how to even get started, right? We was just like, look, literally what happened, like Carmen said, Carmen called, right? We were like, okay, I guess we need email. Okay, if we need email, then we need a name. Okay, so if we probably could do this on PayPal. So now we got to have an email so that people can have a place to give us our money. Then we were like, where do we buy diapers from? So it was like, oh, snap. Should we go to Target? Okay, let's go to Target. Now we had who lives on a low enough walk up or has space in their apartment to be able to have 80 boxes of diapers, cases of diapers brought in at the same time. When I tell you the beef I had with UPS shipped, how many free rounds of shipped can we use so that we can get this? Because we really were connected and committed to also spending 100% of the money that we received on our project, right? So we also were like, we didn't even consider taking a salary, giving ourselves an honorarium for some time. Then all of a sudden people are like, oh, I got clothes, come get clothes. Oh, I got a stroller, come get a stroller. So it was just really having that dynamic. But go ahead, Carmen.
Then the other thing was, so we got all this stuff, we bought this stuff, and we're like, wait a minute, it's a pandemic. How are we gonna get this stuff to people? Like literally, like
Right.
every step of the way was like, oh shit, wait, we didn't. Okay, wait. So then we act like we got volunteer drivers, and we're like, wait a minute, they're spending their gas. Okay, we gotta reimburse their gas.
Right.
How do we figure that out? How many? Like literally every single step of the way, like Evelyn is pointing out. And then it was like, okay, this is not sustainable. What do we do now? Then we called Sade because we knew Sade was doing stuff in Brooklyn with Black Women's Blueprint. So we hit up Sade. Then when you were saying
Yep.
about like organizing this, we dead up and we've mentioned Chanel's name several times. We hit up Chanel, like Chanel, what are we what are we doing, yo? Like,
Yeah.
and then Erin somehow came into the fold.
Exactly.
Which, when we're talking about programming, like we've also, because of Erin's work, we've also become very aware and like vocal about like the CPS system, right? So it was like Erin was like, "Here, I got you." That was actually part of like when we were trying to figure out money and donations. She was like, "Wait, I got this plug. Let me filter this through that." So like literally, it was
Yep.
an operation built brick by brick.
Yep.
So like, what barriers? Everything.
Like, yeah,
And
because
then
we don't even know what we don't know. So there's that. And it's also a pandemic. So as a fun fact, all three of us have not been in the same room at the same time in
Yes.
over 2 years. Like throughout the whole process that this has happened, we have not been in the same room. So that means that everything happened on, shout out to WhatsApp, right? And it's like even now, like Nicole and I will be
I
like,
don't
oh,
think I've seen y'all in person in 3 years.
yes.
Evelyn, I think I saw you right before I left New York.
Yes, and even that, we were all kind of awkward with each other. So if it was like hug, no, wait, I don't take this. I'm gonna put these boxes
I was
on
like,
the
he didn't
ground.
work.
Right. I'm gonna put these boxes on the ground and I'm gonna step back and then you step in and pick them up because we have no clue of how it is that we're supposed to engage each other anymore. So there's also that, right? That all of this has really happened as a benefit of being able to be online, to be aligned, to have, relationships. And so I think that one of the things that people don't also recognize is that like mutual aid, when it works as a barrier of like relationships, right? We were able to leverage the relationships that we've had with other people in our community. And I think that one of the things that people forget is that mutual aid is mutual, right? Like everybody has to have something that they can add, which means that like just asking people for money without actually offering any kind of value is also that can be challenging, right? I think that people gave us money in part because they were really rooted to to like our concept of like people need diapers. And to Carmen's point, she called about diapers, and then she was like, wait, if people need diapers, then they also need wipes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if they need wipes, ain't nobody really trying to go all ham, trying to figure out because I was like, oh well, we need to save money. We could make wipes. And she was like, who the hell is making wipes in a damn global pandemic? Nobody, right? Or like now we need formula. And I was like, well, maybe we should make breastfeeding videos. Because again, save money. And then here comes Carmen is like, no, it's a pandemic. And people need all of the brain power that they can utilize. But again, it was like community where you're throwing in your ideas and you're also recognizing what works for the needs that people have now. Nicole and I have been thinking about creating, another program that we have. We're shortly going to be coming up with like asynchronous content, because when you go places like YouTube, you don't really find Black people talking about pregnancy. You find a whole bunch of white people talking about pregnancy and the experience that they have. So it's like, how do we also utilize the things that we collectively have access to, and not just us? Because I think that one of the things that also happens, like we talked about, is really revolutionizing the way that we look at some of this work, right? Like, is doula work inherent, like parts of it, in terms of like the hoarding that white supremacy culture teaches us?
Yeah.
Like, if we have a client, wouldn't that client be better served by having two people that can support them and be able to be there for them, as opposed to like the traditional backup system, right? So just really thinking about how we can also offer unique value to not just the individuals that connect with us, but also the game at large. Like that's a really important part. And so we're looking at like the partnerships that we had with like Chanel, right? Who was really like kind of, we called, Chanel understood the assignment and was like, oh, y'all need to speak to me. right? So there was kudos to Chanel. Then there was like Erin Miles Cloud of Movement for Family Power. And here's the thing, that when you rock with people who fuck with you for the right reasons, they also, no job is too small. Erin is an attorney who runs her own organization and was like, y'all need, you know, friggin' administrative work. You want me to email people? I will.
Our MailChimp.
MailChimp, right?
Yep.
She was out here setting systems up for us. So it's like there's also that level of like all hands on deck, and nobody is like, oh, I don't do that. Y'all need to find an intern, right? Like nobody has done that. And so that's really makes us really grateful. We've been able to introduce a piece, like an Instagram show called The People's Corner, which is a brainchild of Nicole, where we get different people in birth work to be able to be in conversation about what they're working on, about their thoughts about birth work. And so that's on Instagram, and it's about once a month. And so just really thinking about how collectively we can utilize these experiences to really enhance the field. We're looking at, we received, thanks to Erin and her support, we were able to receive a grant from the Brooklyn Bail Fund that really has sustained us quite a bit, right? Because we keep you know how when you ain't get no money, you like, oh, we could use that money for that. And after a while, Nicole is like, wait, we done budgeted all the money from Brooklyn Bail Fund. Like, you can't keep on tapping into that, right? Carmen was able to leverage her communities to be able to help us generate like our first $10,000. You know, to date, just for numbers, like we've raised over $115,000 that we've been able to utilize. Whoop, whoop, right?
Yes.
And we're at close to 350,000 diapers donated in the Bronx in the last year and a half. And so this is like these, and, you know, and collecting that data, right? And being able to be creative a lot, and also giving people the space that they need to be able to do that work. So Sade has really been independent in the way that she's done the work. She's taken that on, right? So you get people that are good and you trust them, right? Like Adrienne Marie Brown says all the time, that you trust the people and they become trustworthy. And so for us, it's been like just an amazing thing to be able to find members of our community that really wanted to help. Shout out to the volunteers, right? The volunteers that showed up with their cars, picked up diapers. We gave them 18 addresses, and they ain't stopped until they delivered those diapers to those 18 addresses. And here's the thing, that, you know what, like, you got to be rooted in what is right for you. Because how about the fact that sometimes people don't say thank you? So if you talk about like, if you talk about what are some of the difficulties, that is a difficulty, right? That you'll be like, motherfucker, you know that we going out in a goddamn global pandemic to give your punk ass diapers and you ain't saying thank you. But if we're rooted in what we believe, which is that people deserve the support, then that part is not our problem.
Yes.
You stick with what we can do and we do it well. Go ahead, Carmen.
There was some when we were talking about difficulties, well, also, and the thank you piece. It also we are, as you can see, we are as Black as we want to be on this screen and in our lives. We also like rediscovered and like sat with like, we are dealing with a multicultural population, right? And how do we reach the Black members of the Bronx? Because when we were doing our donations, we ran into a lot of folks that weren't necessarily phenotypically Black, right? And then we some of our volunteers faced anti-Blackness, even in the middle of a pandemic, getting a donation. They faced anti-Blackness, right? And so coming up against that, and like the feelings that all of us felt living Black lives, and always also having dealt with that, a lot of Spanish speaking folks. And like when we were talking about trustworthy, I actually spoke to Sade today, and I wish she was here because she has so many stories. But the other thing that we were very aware of, that I think is a tension that we have struggled with, especially with the donations, is we know that our community is used to welfare social service model, right? Where you have to prove that you're alive, and 50 million documents, and like prove that you need things, right? And folks were taken aback by the fact that it was just like, you told us that you need something, so here. Right. And then the other piece was then not wanting folks to become dependent, while also understanding that people had a need. And so some of the stuff that we also developed, as even though I told Evelyn we are not making wipes, we also spoke about some of these children are of potty training age. You know, like how do we empower our community to move them out of diapers and have conversations about potty training and cloth diapers, right? And we were also very like aware and spoke and like talked through like who can actually call off diaper, who is in a position to potty train, right? So like none of these things were ever introduced to the community without like talking through the tensions that we felt. The other thing is that um not only did we do donations, but folks got like resources. Like folks didn't just need diapers, wipes, and formula. Folks needed food. Folks needed like rent. Like I just heard from Sade that like people are behind a year and a half on rent right now in the Bronx. And I know that that's not just in the Bronx, it's across New York City and across the nation. Like so we're listening to people's other struggles and like wishing that we could do all of the things, but then it also became okay, we can't do that, but then how do we, like, you know, as Evelyn so wonderfully said, how do we connect to other people in the community that do have that on lock? And then in terms of like pivoting to other work, then for me at least, and it's like, damn, these people still need this. Like we are going to be in this pandemic for God knows how long, right? And that's a whole other subject.
Absolutely.
Like how do we help folks that we know or like need this? Because that's the other thing. And at least I feel a sense of like rage around that. Like there is like one or two like diaper donation organizations in the Bronx, but that this has been a need even before the pandemic, right? So it's like if we are stepping in this gap, and when we're talking, well, I'm not really like the person that you should call to go to like meetings with professional people at all, but I do my best. I try. And when we spoke to these elected officials, like it was just like, yeah, you know, like there's this process for you to get money through city council, blah 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 blah. And we're sitting there like, but we need the money now. Like you're talking about some process is gonna happen next year. Like what are you doing to step in this gap right now? We are standing in this gap with other mutual aid organizations. So for me at least, is like the barrier around like I'm sitting here asking you to help, and then I have to remain professional in your face. I know I remember we definitely professionally came out of our faces with one particular elected official,
Hmm.
because they decided to black on us on
Mhm.
something that was incredibly petty. And it's like, this is what you're worried about as a political, as a elected official. Like we're talking about people's lives. We're talking about children not being able to have their basic hygiene met. And you want us to have a conversation about how you didn't like how X, Y, and Z went down. So for
Katie
me,
was on that call also.
And we were stunned. I think collectively we were like stunned. And once we got our bearings, because you know, you going in, you're like, you know, humble and ignorant about the process. So for somebody who to take advantage of you in that way, felt so tremendously abusive that once we got our back, we were like, wait, hold up, bruh. Like
Right.
what you're not gonna do, right? Is, and I was just like, you know what? Like they don't even deserve this. Like they don't even deserve our energy. Like really being clear about that space. And I mean, I think one of the things that Nicole said and all the things that Carmen said, most definitely. But one thing that you said, Nicole, that really resonates with me is like this belief that people conflate urgency with recklessness.
Mm. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And we operated, and I think it's really important for us to be clear that we operated with significant urgency, but we were not reckless. We was made for this. We understood our community, right? We rocked with each other and had deep respect for the way that people also had to offer. And all of the things that we've done collectively and individually thus far really enabled us to dig deeply, right? When we realize, oh, all right, the need right now is for doulas. We're doulas. We can offer that, right? And if we can't offer it, what do we know to be missing in the field of doula work that we can also support people? So Nicole was like, they need to meet more frequently. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to have an agenda. Like this is a job. There's specific information that needs to be distributed to our doulas because we also want them to show up a certain way and to be able to increase and improve their practice. We also made it very clear that if we couldn't pay you a whole bunch, we could pay you fast.
Yes, and that part about being as new and as small as we are, yet still understanding the importance of prioritizing one's compensation, and then having a look at the various programs that are city funded that we've each gone through and having to wait a year or more to be paid. Like, how are we able to pull this off? But it's not being done in other spaces that have such a greater capacity. Like, how, you know? So, you know, as you're speaking, Evelyn, I'm just like, okay, right there, you know, therein lies our presentation on community responsiveness. And it's just a radical act of urgency, you know, and why is that so radical? I cannot answer that for you. However, what we do know, and I think, you know, part of what we bring to this work is, like we say it again and again, we are members of these communities. You know, I have experience and I think that we each can attest to this, having to enter into a WIC office, or, you know, what it feels like to carve out your whole day to recertify for food stamps, because it's going to take the whole day, you know, and not wanting to replicate that in what we're providing, you know. So for real, no strings attached, you know, and we know that our communities are worthy of this and that it's needed now, you know, and now more than ever.
Yes, most definitely. And also, it's just like, I mean, there's a part of us that wishes that we didn't have to exist. Right? We shouldn't have to exist. It's great that we can exist and that we can come up with this space, but also thinking about the fact that what do we need to do? I think our question, you know, that kind of sits up here and collectively like wraps us, is like, what do we need to do to create spaces where funds are not raised due to Black death? Right?
We need a conference on that.
That's it. That should not be the fundamental reason why people all of a sudden like, ooh, Black women, like, ooh, they need to, ooh. It's like, what do we need to do to create these spaces? And that this, and you know, and I like talking about barriers, a barrier is that we have families, we are working people, we have other jobs, right? Throughout this work, it's like time is a barrier, right? Funds are barriers. You know, just really, these are things, and also just the wear and tear that this work will take on you, even when you're doing it beautifully and well, the reality that like your efforts we're out here like becoming transformers with each other because of some shit that is preventable, right? Because the root of this is that if fools weren't racist, right? If fools weren't classist, right? Where somehow the work and the effort of doulas is like, oh, that's not a priority for us to pay them. They're gonna be all right. Like our children eat air, like we eat air. Like I don't want the extra guac. Right? I'm like, so there's that piece of just really the fundamental reason why we're here is less than optimal. And we are forced to really respond to the societal needs that are caused by people who are committed to causing societal harms. And that's a problem.
I wanted to mention that in some of the future programming that we are looking at, we're also looking to not only respond to our community, but also, you know, in the truest sense of the word radical, get to the root of what is destabilizing our community, right? So like, yes, folks need childcare, but they need work, right? So like, as we're creating this system, how are we also empowering folks who may have wanted to enter the child care profession, right, or other professions that are going to generate money, even though this, you know, the world is seems to be ending, at least from my perspective. How do we not that we need self-sufficiency, because I sometimes struggle with like self-sufficiency, because it's kind of like go ahead and swim and not be held and be interdependent with your community. But like, again, like when, you know, talking about responding to our community, these folks are in this position to need these donations because they need money, right? So like, we have to address that. As much as we need money to help them, we also think about like, all right, how do we help you get what you need? Because if this was another world, you wouldn't be talking to us, and we wouldn't be talking to you. And I'm, you know, I think I've always been disappointed with the elected officials in the Bronx, but this experience has, like, the disappointment is like in the seventh circle of hell at this point, where all the traitors hang out. Right? I read Dante's Inferno. For some reason I know the circles, but whatever. In that particular circle, that's where they all hang out, right? And it's just kind of like, why am I bothering with y'all? Why am I going to apply for this grant that I may or may not get? Why are you giving these grants to organizations that are doing the same tired thing and not responding to community in the ways that they do? Like, why are we only speaking about like put your baby in a crib and not acknowledging that we're talking about multicultural communities in the Bronx who may need other alternatives for the way that they sleep, the way that they feed their children? So like Evelyn said, I really, like, if I didn't have to do this, or most of us didn't have to do this, I might be gardening or painting, sleeping maybe, I don't know, eating. I love eating, I love food. Like, I would not be doing this. Like, this would not be what I would be doing with my free time. And so, and I don't, like, I hope y'all don't take that as like, oh, they're just doing this reluctantly, because it's also like, we are carrying the mantle of this ancestral, historic, let's get free mission, right? This is not like it just started with BX Rebirth, or it just started with FA, or started with Chanel. Like, we are carrying what our mothers and our folks have done, but we're tired. They didn't want to be doing this. They had to, because we have children, because we have communities, because people are dying. And that's another thing that blows my mind. And I think, to the point of us just not just responding to community, but responding to each other. That's one of the beautiful things that I have always loved with working with Evelyn and Nicole, that we respond to each other and where each other is at the current moments. Like, so like there have been times, for example, for me, like I just could not respond for like several weeks because I was dealing with other stuff in the birth world and my life, where I was like, right now I cannot. And it wasn't like shaming, like, you're supposed to clock in at 8 o'clock and do this work, Carmen. It was, you know what, actually, you are a Black woman having an entire life experience. We respond to each other in that, like, yo, like, we're going through something in your personal life. I'm gonna call you to see how you are doing. Not so that we could talk about business, even though it usually like goes there. No, I want to know how you are doing, right? Or like, I love our WhatsApp group where like we're responding and we're like talking about the weather, or we're talking about, yo, did you see this on Instagram? Or like, even getting ready for this, like we were posting pictures. We were like, girl, you cute. Oh my God, look at you with your hair done. Look at you with your makeup. And so like, when we talk about our organizations, when we talk about mutual aid, we really need to step outside of what this professionalism thing is, right? And see each other, right? Nicole sees me. I see Nicole. Evelyn sees me. I see Evelyn, right? And this is why this work, as much as it can be heavy, is also very light. Because there's a lot of laughter, there's a hell of a lot of jokes. All the jokes that y'all have heard us make in the last like hour, we make this on the regular with each other. We are always laughing, not because shit is funny, but because it is right now in the moment, and because we know that like we need to sustain ourselves by sustaining each other. And so you know, like, yes, we could talk about the barriers, but for me, like, that's why I keep calling Nicole, I keep calling Evelyn, and I keep texting them, because it's not just, oh, we have this thing and then we go separate ways. Like, nah, these are like my community members that I walk with, right? And I think that for anyone who does mutual aid and is in a group with other folks, like, if you don't have that, there's no success. You're not like in the work with folks. Like, and then when we were able to raise all the money that we did that because of social capital. Like none of us got like trust funds at all. The reason why we were able to raise that money is because people outside of us know who we are and they trust us. Right? So like getting that money was like, wait a minute, we need money, hold up, let me call some people. Like not even like phoning in a favor, just like, yo, this is what needs to happen. People's like, all right, bet, just off the strength that it's you. Right? Like just off the strength that it's Evelyn, just off the strength that it's Nicole, I'm gonna give you this money. Right? And so like as important as the work that we have done is, I really want to like highlight and like uplift that lightness and all of this heaviness, right? Like, because what we're talking about, what we've done is heavy. Like what we've witnessed, like Sade told me that she's seen babies go from like 1 to 2 years old at this point. We're talking about a pandemic that's almost 2 years. So we've seen babies who were in the womb when we were giving their mothers donations for their first baby that have second babies now. We have families that had to leave New York City, right? Because they could not sustain it. Like, so in all of that, like, it's like, yo, but we have each other. And not only do we have this organization, we have each other that we have cultivated these relationships, and that I could call you and cry about my life, not just about the work, but like about my life. And I could call you to show up and roll up to a meeting if I need you to. That's the other thing. Like when we say we're from the Bronx or from we just black, we show up as our whole black selves everywhere. Which means that if like if I need Nicole, Evelyn to roll up into a meeting because I need them to like lay down the law, we are there. Right. And then that also goes like, I think that we have been able to exist the way that we do, coming back to what somebody said about like years of community work, because we can also do that with some of the folks that are even in this room right now, where we could be like, I haven't spoken to you in like weeks, but I need you to be X, Y, and Z here. And it's like, all right, let's show up. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things in all of this bleakness in the pandemic that I've seen, that we have cultivated these relationships to be able to show up in the darkest of times.
Yes. I second all of that. I, as a deeply introverted person, I have to say I would have thrown in the towel a while ago if this felt like too taxing, you know, and if it didn't feel as light as it does, at the same time as feeling like really, really rewarding and like, okay, like we're doing something, you know. And also, you know, to your point, Carmen, it's tiring not being able to show up as your full self, right? And that is a direct result of living in a white supremacist society. You know, as Black people, we're constantly, you know, forced to and made to feel like we must either hide parts of ourselves or completely transform, you know. And to do this type of work and feel like you're also tasked with that would not rock at all. So yeah, I 100% can attest to that. Also future programming, and you mentioned childcare. I just want to lift up that folks who are unemployed also need childcare, right? And that's something that we have spoken about as a form of future programming. Evelyn came up with this really, like, again, super basic, but in our world, radical idea of offering micro grants to people who are caregivers, who are parents and need like 2 hours to go and get their toes done, you know, or 2 hours to just have their children or whoever it is that they're caring for be in trusted hands and entrusted under the supervision of someone that can be trusted so that they can like do them. You know, this is part of healing. This is part of like community care. So, and I'd really love to see that part of the work, that part of the vision come to fruition.
After what, 18, 19 months that we've been in this space, like we need that, right? Shout out to the parents that are, you know, sending their kids back to school, you know, in a week or so, that they're like, I might feel guilty, I might have all the thoughts, but like we both need the separation, right? And if there were that energy where people could have safe spaces to be able to like do small things, you know, and again, these are micro grants that have macro impact, right? I've spoken before about how the best, you know how people are like, oh, you need self-care, right? Self-care and self-care. And the best thing I ever did in my self-care was to retire and reject the notion that I had to show up a certain way in order to get what's mine, right? That I had to use a certain type of language, that I had to say the right things to the right people at the right time. And I think that what we do is that we invite other people to be able to show up in their fullness, right? In their wholeness, and that we believe you to be whole. We see you as whole, right? We don't see you as damaged or harmed, or that you have to prove anything, which is why when, Nicole and Carmen both spoke about our intentionality around not asking people to prove anything, right? In one of our People's Corners, Tanya Fields eloquently spoke about the difference between deserve and worth. And she said that deserve was transactional, where you had to prove something in order to deserve it, but that if you're worth, it's inherent. And so for us, the power, the greatness that is inherent in the people in the Bronx and Blackness is inherent. They're worth the effort that it takes, right? And we see them that way. And I think that that's what enables us to really develop the strength and maintain the stability that we have, because we really are coming from a place of real love and admiration and appreciation for our community. And we are not looking at each other or anyone else through a primarily deficit lens. Like, we see asset. I think where other people see possibly like just a challenge or something that needs to be fixed, we're like, we get it, right? Like, we get it right down to, Carmen talked about the iterations of our name. And we had like an acronym that we was like, oh, but we heard that that's like gang related. But we was like, but niggas be in gangs. Like it was just like, so I mean, why we can't just keep it, right? But just having that kind of like, we're not putting anybody down based on what they have or what they don't have. We're just like, you here, we got you. And that's an important, I hope, and I think that we have reason to believe that the effort and the care that we give is also received in the spirit that it is given. And that gives me a lot of personal gratitude that we are able to step into a space like that. And that we did it in a pandemic. Like, that's a level of badassery that is like, damn, go us. So there's also that.
I want to also highlight the importance of friendship and community organizing that may not get through, through social media. Like, you may not able to see it. Like, I met all of y'all like my first year in New York when I was a baby, and to see where we are today and now leading and now creating things that like, oh yeah, that doesn't work for me, so we're gonna do this shit ourselves, right? And particularly even you guys talking about the professionals, that is something I started last year, that I really was just like, I have to stop performing because I get really fucking drained by it, and this idea that like, oh, you won't be hired, you're not going to get the grant if you do this, you talk this shit, blah blah. Recently the Gates Foundation reached out to me, and I was like, I know the motherfuckers don't see me tweet about them all day long, what they want, right? But for some reason, because of our authenticity and our refusal to carry on that professionalism from the generations before us, these organizations are realizing that they have to also evolve or they get left behind. They have to also realize that you're not going to find your perfect spokesperson who has 10 years of tweets and then you say nothing fucked up, right? But particularly just even with BX Rebirth and Nature's Song and Doula Chronicles, for instance, it's being able to do things like this is the social currency that we have, or the social cloud art, but it's also our friends. We're friends with each other. We commune with each other. And that's what really helps at the end of the day when this work feels like you should be bitter, was why we don't turn to that, because this is a space of making sure that we take care of each other, because you do get burnt out. And until we reach that, a lot of the results of the abolitionist things that Katie was mentioning in her last presentation, we will experience a lot of dread and grief and mourning until then. And it's nice to have that laughter while we do this work. So thank you.
It's necessary. It's absolutely necessary to have the laughter. Thank you, FA. Like, it's really necessary. And I think that also it speaks to the work that we've had to do as individuals, because that also enables us to be deeper in the work, right? When you know who the hell you are, there's no pretense, right? And I think that for each one of us, we have a deep, our confidence and our ability is also rooted very deeply. And that also was part of the reason why we was like, oh, I got it. And we were able to be very vulnerable with each other, right? Like, I don't know, but let's figure this shit out, right? Because sometimes like every space is not the right space where you're able to freely say, I don't know, and feel like someone is gonna still wanna rock with you, right? Like we often are declined the opportunity to be in progress. People want you full made, right?
Completely unrealistic. Like, come on. I just turned the corner, you know, I just entered into my 30s and you expect me not to fuck up? Like, that's just not gonna happen, you know? And I'm out here learning my new self as a parent. So just, it's not realistic. And that needs to be acknowledged more often.
That's part of the work, right? That we deserve the opportunity to fuck up, right? Non-white people are always decline the opportunity to be in progress, like, or to be able to fuck up. We can't make a mistake. And then they wonder why we don't take risks. So yeah, this has been a real pleasure. Are there any questions right before we start to wrap up? We know that we're like over time. If there's anything that is coming up for y'all that are here in this room, definitely let us know. Drop a question or a comment in the chat. So happy Thursday. It's my favorite day of the week.
Yes.
Let's see. All right. So,
We are going to, I am going to share the recording with ticket holders specifically, and then, you know, surprises come at the end, as always.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you everyone for being here. And thank you so much, FA, for your patience with us, getting our materials to you, and also for inviting us. And
I mean, Dual Chronicles or Reproductive Future is as grassroots. So I had clinic yesterday morning, and I'm in Houston today. So this is how we move it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Like, yo,
So
Effie's gonna have an aneurysm with us. She's like, I need this now. Okay, hold on. 5 hours goes by. She still needs it, y'all.
we were like, sorry, FA. But definitely thank you so much for cultivating this space and for recognizing the need that there is to really be able to think and to reimagine, for giving us the space to be able to reimagine and to share stories of reimagining how we can show up in birth work. So powerful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone in the chat that has been really kind with your gracious words. We are appreciative. And also tell all your friends, your mans and them that we still need some coin, because this work can't stop, won't stop, like Diddy said. So definitely follow us at BX Rebirth Collective on Instagram to find out how you can continue to support.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Good night, y'all.
Yay, that was fun.
We gotta go now, though.
I know, right? I'm like, I was all like, make me the host, FA. Let me go take this gummy. Bye, y'all.
F